It's time to question if Jerome Tang can navigate roster management in today's college basketball.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. We are going to dive into a conversation about the men's basketball team because there is a stalemate of no news right now, and it is driving me insane. Before we dive into that, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, let's dive into this because there's so much to talk about when it comes to Jerome Tang, the men's basketball team, the transfer portal that just ended. There's just so much news that's not occurring here in Manhattan. And that's honestly frustrating. It's the biggest frustration of all is after having a subpar year. I mean, I think you probably go even lower than that. Just quite honestly, a disappointing season for the men's basketball team. You're not seeing any traction to get better in not only the Big 12, but in college basketball as a whole. And I believe you are starting to now get to the point, and we might be well past it, to be completely honest, to where you have to start questioning if Jerome Tang and his coaching staff can navigate roster management in this new world of college athletics. Whether you're talking about the NIL world, the transfer portal world, if you want to put them all together in one big ball, call it a happy family, so be it. But there's a big problem right now that is stemming and building up in Kansas State. And I think we need to start leaning a directional finger towards Jerome Tang. And I'm going to talk to you in this episode why I think that there's a problem stemming and brewing here in Manhattan. And I'm sure that I'm not going to give you anything that's new here. But I think there's just a lot of things that need to be thrown on the table. And maybe we can start getting some answers to these questions. And I think it starts possibly right here today. And I think the first question you have to ask when you're beginning this entire thing, because it's the biggest news on social media when you see a Kansas State men's basketball team lose, the first thing that goes up is, should Jerome Tang continue to be the men's basketball coach at Kansas State? Should he be on the hot seat? Yeah, we're firing away right off the bat on this episode here on this happy Monday. It's not so happy here at Locked On Kansas State because I want to ask the question, should Jerome Tang be on the hot seat? Well, it's a difficult question. It's a loaded question because his performance most definitely puts him there. But when you look at the contract of Jerome Tang, especially the new one he signed in 2024 after the debacle between him and potentially going to Arkansas, it's a tough ask for Kansas State and the rest of the boosters or whatever the case may be, athletic director, to say that Jerome Tang may potentially be on the hot seat. And let's go ahead and put that on the record. They're not going to go out and say that either. They're not going to light a fire under him, at least not publicly. We didn't even hear from Jerome Tang when there was a potential issue inside the locker room. They wouldn't answer that question. And I'm talking about the Buddy Rich situation this past season, where he stopped playing in the basketball games. And we had someone in the media ask what was going on. He refused to answer that question. So we're not going to find out if Jerome Tang is ever going to be on the hot seat. This is all for speculation. And that's why we have this podcast. For speculation, reactions, opinions. That's what we're here for at Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. But the buyout is absolutely egregious. And it really put this team in a rough spot. There's no doubt about that. After his first season with Kansas State, and we all remember that first season, it was a great first season, got to the Elite Eight. He goes ahead and signs a new contract that will keep him to Manhattan through the 2029 and 2030 season. And this all stemmed, as I mentioned, from turning down a head coach vacancy with the SEC school, Arkansas Razorbacks. Now, this would have been a new step for Jerome Tang because he has been with the Big 12 for quite some time. Even before Kansas State, he was with Baylor for a very long time. And we'll talk about that just to kind of brush up on his whole coaching reign in just a second. But to finish up this conversation, let's just talk about what his new contract is. And we kind of talked about this in before, and numbers were a little muddled in the past when we brought this up. So let's get the actual numbers. If you've been an everydayer for quite some time, I want to make sure we have this right this time. The annual salary increases $500,000 every year to his original $3 million annual pay, and then along with an additional $100,000 each season. So, for example, this past year in 2024-2025 season, Jerome Tang made $3.5 million, and it will increase to 3.6 this next season, and it will finish, if he completes his entire contract, up to $4.1 million in the 2030-31 season. It feels like a long time away, but it comes quick, believe me. But the biggest issue, and what we are obviously talking about in this conversation, is what does the buyout mean? What is the buyout? The buyout is crazy. It is absolutely crazy. If Jerome Tang was fired today or tomorrow or any time between now and before this next season ends, Kansas State would owe Jerome Tang $18,675,000. Insane. So that's why, to me, why I think this is a very tough conversation to have if you wanted to say we should get rid of Jerome Tang. Jerome Tang is on the hot seat. NIL has changed the game. We're bringing in players at $2, $3, $4 million paychecks. At Kansas State alone, last year, Coleman Hawkins, $2 million. But I still don't think that's going to change the game with Jerome Tang getting bought out at $18.7 million. Now, that number does decrease $3 million each year. So if he makes it through this season, and then they decide that you want to maybe make a change anytime after May 1st of 2026 to the end of the following season, in April 30th, 2027, that goes down to 15.7. And then next year, 12.7. The year after that, 9.7. These are all approximate numbers, by the way. Next year, 6.5. And then his final season before his contract is expired, it's 4.4 or whatever the prorated amount based on the time that he is terminated, if that would to be the case. So I guess what I'm saying here is that when you look at what Jerome Tang has done over the past couple seasons, and it starts off with that Elite Eight place, that the spot, the 26-10 team that went and made that deep run in the NCAA tournament, hasn't done anything since. What does a third season of no dancing, what does that mean? Does that make that 18.6 start feeling a little bit more interesting? Does that 15.7 feel approachable? Where do you finally hit that happy medium? And is this the right conversation to have right now, personally in May, but after two disappointing seasons? I think so. And I like to think of myself as a Jerome Tang believer, but I also think that you need to be one of your biggest critics as well. Excuse me. I think you absolutely have to ask the tough questions before anybody else does. Because if we're not doing it, somebody else is. So we better try and make sense of the conversation. I tried to do it numbers here. Let's talk a little deeper in his Elite Eight run, his recruitment, and so much more. We'll talk on the other line, on the other side, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Today's episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. No, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So you stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I first started Monarch, I realized just how much money I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget much smarter and save much more. So take control with your finances from Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We are so close on YouTube to 900 subscribers. You guys are absolutely amazing. I love doing this show every single day. We were off last week, had a little bit of travel, also had some issues with some equipment, but we are back. We are rocking, and we are not going anywhere right here at Locked On Kansas State. If you can see, I'm traveling, got this crazy background going here. This is not my look. I usually have that nice black screen behind me, but we'll take it. We'll take it. I even changed it up and had my hat forward for this one today. So we're talking Jerome Tang. We're talking the Kansas State men's basketball team. We're talking potential roster management. I don't even know if you can say potential. I think you have roster management, mismanagement, an issue with the men's basketball squad. And let's just go back to last year. Obviously, you have this huge thought process of having the best transfer portal class coming in. All these people are saying, national media pundits are saying Kansas State's going to be great. Look at this transfer portal coming in. Look at Coleman Hawkins. Look at this Doug McDaniel. Look at all these guys. It's going to be great. And it was disappointing. There's no other way around it. They were absolutely dull to start off the season, and it took so long to get back to being in to the team that we thought they were going to be, and it was just too late. There was a flash of the team that we thought they could be, but unfortunately, it was in the middle of Big 12 play, and it just wasn't soon enough. It just wasn't soon enough. So what's the next move here? The Elite Eight is obviously the thing you think about when you think of Jerome Tang and his success, but with whose roster did he really do that with, right? Let's play devil's advocate for a minute, and this might be more than a minute, but his first year was great, but it doesn't seem like he can manage a roster now that this new transfer portal is in the limelight. With what we saw with the Coleman Hawkins situation, Doug McDaniel, there was never this buy-in that we continue to talk about. There's never there. If you can't get the team that you create and the money that was there to work the right way, where does the finger need to be pointed at? And I think in this case, you have to point it towards the coaching staff. And this is now 2 years in a row that we're seeing it not work out. Really, I mean, that's where we're at. He can coach other people's players. That's great. But that doesn't help us moving forward. And what about recruitment, right? I mean, we can go to that portion now as well. Talk about the transfer portal, talk about the things that have gone wrong over the past couple of years, the major storylines, if you will. But recruitment has been just as bad and might be the biggest issue of them all, where we're not seeing enough, or quite honestly, really any homegrown talent being created under Jerome Tang. This past season, David Castillo is really his best win so far. Will that pan out? Well, that's yet to be determined. We'll see if he makes a bigger splash this next year. But he was the lone freshman on the squad last season, a squad that went 16-17. And he did play a good amount. So there is that. And in a world where you are looking to recruit, and in this case, in Tang's model, whatever is working right now, and I don't even want to use the word working, but whatever he is doing right now, his model is not focused on recruiting. The last few seasons, it has been focused on the transfer portal. He's only had a few freshmen, and then he has to retool in the portal again. And it hasn't worked. And we were hoping that we were going to get more of those freshmen this next coming season. That didn't happen. We look like we're going to see maybe one true freshman, potentially two, if you consider an international player a freshman at this moment. We'll talk about the roster in just a second, but let's wrap up David Castillo here. David Castillo might be his biggest win so far in all of recruiting. He played 32 of the 33 games this last season. He did start some multiple games. He started against Drake. He started against Wichita State. He played a good amount of time. And there was a moment where we could see, at least I could, the potential of him being the guard of the future. And I hope that could progress into something. And my hopes is that does this next coming year. Because as of right now, there is a wide open window. If you're looking at this roster right now, there is a wide open window for David Castillo to take over as the point guard. Will he be able to do that? It's yet to be determined, right? And we're talking about a guy who is bringing the most production back from last year's squad, but that's only 2.5 points per game and only 22% in shooting from the field. I mean, that's not something that you're thinking about, oh man, that's great production that we're bringing back to this squad. No, that's it. That's the most that you're getting back after losing McDaniel, after losing Housen, after Gasson leaves, after we lose Hawkins from, eligibility reasons. David Castillo is the guy from, if you're just looking on paper, this next season, in the sense of returning minutes, returning points. It's a rough look. That's a rough look. Let's wrap up this conversation and talk about this roster as of right now. As of right now, there are 9 players on this roster. So obviously things have to be changed, whether there's 4 more additions, whether there's 6 more additions at the max. Kansas State, you could expect them maybe only have 13 of the 15 scholarships. I've seen that been tossed around. But no matter the case, you're at 9. You have to at least add 4 more players. So keep that in mind when we're having this conversation. And keep that also in mind when we're talking about roster mismanagement and how we're talking about that we are in the middle of May, folks, and we still have 4 more roster spots to fill. Weeks after the portal has closed. Weeks. And we hear all this international chatter. We got 1, but not enough to actually be excited about, right? I have that portal chatter thing at the bottom of our screen today because this chatter, I'm hoping, starts to get going again because we're not really talking portal chatter today. We're more talking about the lack of portal chatter. We'll have two, technically 3 seniors on the squad: Tyreek Smith, Kamari McGriff, and Nate Johnson. Nate Johnson should be a dog. We'll see. Taj Manning, Moby, those guys are juniors. We'll see them come back. And Bashir Jr. will be the other junior as well, transferring over. Should be a great 3-point shooter, we hope. Then you got Castillo, who's the lone sophomore after being the lone freshman. And then you have 2 freshmen, technically 2 freshmen, with Xavier Wilson and Andre Kostick. Kostick being the international player coming over. We've talked about all these new guys. If you want to get a more detailed look into these new guys, check them out on the channel. Just search their name on the channel. They'll pop up. We did a video on each of the new players coming over to Kansas State this season so far. We will do the same when the inevitable 4, 5, or 6 new players come on the roster as well. But the main address here is Jerome Tang. What are we doing here? Trouble building up through recruitment. Castillo being the biggest win so far. Is Gene Taylor putting this program in a bad spot? And what I mean by that is that contract. Let's reiterate the success that Jerome Tang has had since he's been at Kansas State. 61-41, 28-28, complete right at 500 in the conference. When you're talking about the Big 12, who arguably, in my opinion, SEC might have had it this year, but year in and year out, the Big 12 is one of the best, if not the best, basketball conference in America. And you're only 500 in that? Got to get better than that, especially after that Elite 8 run to start your tenure. So much hype, so much things to be excited about after that first 26-10 record. You win the college coach of the year, you win Big 12 coach of the year, AP Big 12 coach of the year, all that stuff in 2023. And then the next season, you go 19-15, you lose in the first round of the NIT. You finish tied for 9th in the same exact spot in the Big 12 conference. Same spot you finished this year. But you had a losing record this year, 16-17, 9-11 in conference. You only have 1 winning season in conference out of those 3. That's the year you went to the Elite 8. And you still only finished 3rd in the Big 12. right? That shows how great this conference is. Don't get me wrong. But that shows you had to get a little lucky in the Elite Eight. And I think we all know that we did. We all know we went a little farther than what was expected. Well, what is expected in the 2025-2026 season is getting back to the dance. That's what's expected. Is it realistic? With this roster, I'm not too hopeful. I think there's got to be a lot more changes for that to happen. But let's continue on this track with Jerome Tang, this roster mismanagement. And should we start getting used to winning? Because we were told that once before. Let's finish this up right here on Locked On Kansas State. Christian Rao, your host of Locked On Kansas State. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. And if you're listening in audio form, I thank you. And if you are an audio listener, I reward my audio listeners by putting out the episode at least an hour earlier than the one that goes on YouTube. So if you're looking for the episode, maybe on your morning drive, morning commute, you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, like Locked On Kansas State. Jerome Tang, to me, needs to be on the hot seat. No matter what, if you look at his buyout or not, I think you have to have an honest conversation with yourself if there is not a successful season in 2025/26. And a successful season is having a postseason appearance. And a postseason appearance does not mean the crown. It does not mean the NIT. No. A postseason appearance means you are one of the 68. A first four appearance in Dayton, Ohio, if that's where they continue to keep it, which I don't think they're changing that, would be considered a successful season this next year. After missing the dance 2 years in a row, if you lost in the first four, I'll come on this show the day after and say this is a successful season. We'll have no choice but to say that. One of the 68 teams, whether you lose in the first round or you lose in the national championship, will be considered a successful season for Kansas State in 2025/26. If you think I'm wrong, if you think that there is a different type of definition for what a successful season is next year, let me know in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter X at LockedOnKState. I want to know, because I don't think you can have a different definition, a different expectation after having 2 disappointing years at losing in the first round of the NIT. And let's be honest, that was a team that didn't want to be there. And then a team that didn't have any postseason at all, which probably would have resulted in the same exact type of losing in the first round anyways, because of players who didn't want to be there, injuries, say what you will, especially based on how many players left in the portal this last season. So you could probably just put the last 2 seasons together and say they were the exact same thing, because that's basically the same result. Just this last one looked a lot worse because you ended with a losing record. And we were supposed to get used to winning. That's what Coach Tang said after beating Kansas a few years ago. Remember, he jumped up on the scores table and he said, get used to winning. What's happened since then? What's happened since that quote? Not much winning. Not any NCAA tournament appearances, so no wins there. Not much winning in Big 12 tournament play either. What actual winning has happened? Got a nice win on the road against Iowa State this year. I'll give you that. You did beat Kansas in Manhattan this year. Couldn't do it in Lawrence. Not this season. That was a rough go. Remember that 14-0 run that they started off against us? First 4 minutes was dreadful for Kansas State this year. You got some nice small victories this year. Tiny victories. Tiny victories don't even get you to the crown. We found that out this year. So, should we get used to winning? Is this the year we should start getting used to it? I hope so. I truly hope so. You know, we talk about Jerome Tang and him being the head coach of this squad for a couple of years now. You know, before he was the coach of Kansas State, and again, this is probably not news to you guys, but was with Baylor from 2003 all the way to 2022, an assistant, also the associate head coach, whatever the case may be, those titles during that time, 2003 to 2017, an assistant, 2017 to 22, technically the associate head coach, still an assistant, but so he's been with the Big 12 for quite some time. He was with Baylor, with Scott Drew. Scott Drew had to deal with this big turnover this past year. Every single player, Baylor at one point this year had no players, zero, zilch, none on the roster. Is that a culture problem? Is it contagious? Is maybe that's what's happening? Maybe that roster tree, that coaching tree has an issue? I don't know if we want to go down that route, but does it deserve to have a question asked? Should maybe we think that way? Now, Baylor has reloaded quite well, so maybe we shouldn't. But I think you might want to think about it, especially if you have to start looking for new candidates, if you decide to take that buyout route at some point in the next few seasons. This whole new world of transfer portal and NIL has changed the way that you should look at coaching. You should absolutely change the way you look at coaching. It's not just the basketball world either. Remember how crazy we all felt and looked at Deion Sanders when he started off at Colorado, a team that had just a few wins a year before? 2 years in, he gets them to 9-3 team. Cleans house in year one. That's a lot harder actually to do on the football side. But we're seeing that on the basketball world over and over again. And Jerome Tang in Kansas State is one of them. They're cleaning house year after year because they have no choice. And although it sounds like they want to change their whole culture, change their model, it's not working. This whole buy-in that they continue to talk about year in and year out, game in and game out, every single game this past season, every post game, every presser that Jerome Tang talked about, especially early in the season when things weren't working, when things weren't clicking, they kept saying, got to get the buy-in. This team is just not bought in yet. And the more and more I think about it, I think he was just trying to buy some time for his roster that he built through the portal that wasn't ready to play with each other yet. And when, by the way, we still don't have 4 players on this roster, it looks like that's going to happen again, folks. But he also wanted to push for a Houston model. How great would it be to have a retention model like Houston, a team that was just in the national championship, a team that always, unless you're leaving because of graduation or the NBA draft, you're not going anywhere. Oh, and you recruit fantastic. None of that happened this year. None of that happened last year. So if you want to continue to milk that and talk about it in the media, how nice it would be, you got to prove it. And so far, you have done none of those things, Jerome Tang and your coaching staff. You haven't. You've proved that you can win with other coaches' players, making it to the Elite Eight. You've proved that you can bring people to Kansas State because of high NIL. You've proved that you're able to bring a decent amount of exposure to this team as being a Big 12, a coach of the year, but you haven't proved that you can be successful with the players that you bring in, whether it's recruiting or through the transfer portal. And the last 2 years have proved that. And as of right now, as we sit with the 9 players on this roster, with the best player at the moment being potentially an international player who has some pro experience that we hope translates well to the NCAA, or possibly the MAC player of the year, a mid-major conference, we're going to hope also translates to the Big 12. As of right now, you don't have a proven player that can make noise at a Power 4 level. Not one. And it's the middle of May. I had a lot more notes on this today. That means we're going to have another episode about this later on, because I had a whole other part of this segment asking, how do we get the fans' trust back? Because it's not there. If I'm feeling this way, I know you're also feeling that way. So we're going to put a pin in this one today, especially if those next 4 or 5 or 6 players that have to be added to this roster, depending if they go at 13 to 15 players, but if they don't turn into a player that we know can be a guaranteed starter and a guaranteed player that can have power for vibes, if you will. If I don't get a warm and fuzzy after this roster's filled, this won't be the last time that we come on here for a vibe check and it's not in good feels, Monday or not. And consider this an overreaction Monday, if you will, in the middle of May as we wait for college basketball season. I don't care. But there is a problem with Kansas State basketball. It needs to be addressed, and it's not happening. And the fact that we are weeks after the portal and we are only at 9 players, it's a problem. Let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. Lots of stuff going on in the future. We're going to have you covered right here. We got a lot more football to talk about. Spring checkups still coming up on the channel. Lots of things here on Locked On Kansas State. And I thank you for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.